Hello everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video we're talking all about the Talbadar Stratagem legendary, as you see up here on the screen, as the countdown timer for Mythic Plus finishes and no key begins. Don't worry, we're getting into it in a second. There we go. Yeah, we're going to be talking all about this. We're running this through Mythic Plus, and I'll talk you through the talent build as well. This is sort of a video, you guys gave very positive feedback to the video I did a few days ago, where in fact we ran this exact same dungeon, the Theater of Pain, but we were trying out a Shadow Flame Prism, which is like the new sort of big, flashy legendary for Shadow Priests in patch 9.0.5. Talbadar Stratagem, though, is still up there, and in fact, I think this is a good comparison. It's different weeks, so we have different affixes. However, I still think that it is a pretty good comparison, so you can see how these two legendaries with their two different builds perform across two different dungeons. One thing to point out right at the start here actually is that we do have Spiteful this week. I could in theory run the Death and Madness talent at level 15 to deal with Spiteful, where whenever a target you kill within 7 seconds of being hit, or sorry, whenever a target dies within 7 seconds of being hit by your Shadow Word Death, it resets the cooldown of Shadow Word Death, and it gives you, what is it, 40 insanity? Over 4 seconds, something like that. Gives you a big chunk of insanity. Very strong, very, very strong on Spiteful to trigger a whole bunch of extra insanity. Decided not to run that for this dungeon because that would actually throw off the comparison between this and the Shadow Flame Prism video quite a lot. What's Talbadar Stratagem though? What is this? What does it actually do? And how is it affecting our playstyle? The playstyle which you've already seen us doing a bit here in the background. So, very simply, whenever you have Shadow Word Pain, Vampiric Touch, and Devouring Plague, so they are our 3 dots. You can see them tracked on the left-hand side of my weak auras there beside my health bar. Whenever those 3 dots are on the same target, our Mind Blast spell, which is then sort of the ability track that's not Shadow Word Pain in between the two, Mind Blast does 60% more damage to that target. So it's a very big, consistent single target damage increase. We are building our talent build then around this spec as well. So we are, of course, going for Misery. That's probably the most noticeable thing. So Misery applies both Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch whenever we cast Vampiric Touch on a target. Important to easily spread our dots. We're not going for Searing Nightmare at all with this build, which is the other option there, which is our AoE Insanity Spender. No good with this legendary, right? Because we need Devouring Plague on our targets to actually do damage. And then another fun talent that we're putting with this one, I guess there's also Fortress of the Mind, by the way, at level 15, where Mind Blast does a bit more damage and generates more insanity. So that obviously is very good. Your Mind Blast is a big chunk of your damage at Talbadar's. Big one, which is quite fun, is Psychic Link. So Psychic Link makes it that whenever we do a Mind Blast, it does half of that damage to every single target that has Vampiric Touch on it. So there you go. That sort of should give you a pretty good idea of what our gameplay style should be. Is when we pull a pack of mobs. You'll see it here when we pull the next pack. We want to dot them all up with Vampiric Touch and by extension with Misery, with Shadow Word Pain as well. Get those dots ticking. They do good damage by themselves. Then we just sort of focus in on the priority target that we are fighting at the time. We also have Void Torrent here with this build. So Void Torrent gives us really good burst of priority damage on a 30-second cooldown, gives us a chunk of insanity, that lets us throw out our Devouring Plague. Then we've got our 3 dots on the target, we start slamming Mind Blasts into that target, which then cleaves quite a bit of damage through the Psychic Link talent onto lots of mobs. It's interesting, right? It's interesting. Obviously, it's not going to do the craziest AoE damage in the world. You know, psychically, we'll see, of course, the damage breakdown at the end here. But you know what I mean? Like, cleaving half damage Mind Blast onto everything, even when they are boosted up by Talbadar Stratagem, you know, you're not doing AoE on the level of, you know, a marksmanship hunter blasting wild marks or something, wild spirits. You know, obviously enough, that's not what's going to happen. But what you do bring is consistent cleave damage, which is good, and also very, very strong single target damage as well. This is a really powerful legendary for single target for Shadow too. As the healer, I think the healer got taken out by Spiteful. Spiteful is definitely a bit messy, I will say that. I just put in a little interlude here. How do you guys find Spiteful? I've heard that they've nerfed it. I have heard that they've nerfed it this rotation so that they've got slightly smaller melee range, something like that, the Spiteful mobs. Or that I think they also made it more obvious when it's fixated. I use an add-on called Plater, which is the nameplate add-on, which makes it very clear when you're fixated. But yeah, I mean, in an organized group, it tends to go a lot better. You can more easily leave them behind, and you just leave the mobs on full health, and you just run on ahead. Obviously, in a pug, without that coordination, you can easily have players get trapped behind, or they'll be trapped with Spiteful mobs between them and where they should be going. So you kind of have to kill the Spiteful mobs. So you'll see that through our dungeon run. We're going to sort of be stopping quite often to actually kill those Spiteful mobs. That's worth pointing out. But yeah, certainly it's one thing that you also need, which is important, I think, to make Talbadar Stratagem really work. I actually think that Shadowflame Prism is somewhat reliant on it, but not as reliant. And that's the effect you can see on my character now. It looks very cool, which is the Night Fae Covenant for Shadow Priest, Fae Guardians. The reason is this is a 1.5 minute cooldown. It gives you, well, it gives you damage reduction, which is nice. It gives you bonus insanity from the last target you dotted with Shadow Word Pain, which is also nice. The big thing, though, the really big thing, is that it gives you up to 20 seconds of cooldown reduction on your Void Eruption on Void form, just by having that buff active on you. That is super important. It brings your Void form from 1 minute 30 cooldown, which is already low, it's already good. It brings that down to a 1 minute 10 second cooldown. The reason that is such a big deal, there we go, we're going to Psychic Scream that Spiteful mob away, thanks very much. By the way, we are talented into our single target stun, Psychic Horror. I didn't mention that in the talent discussion. That's super good on Spiteful, very helpful, you know, stunning a Spiteful mob that's on a melee player when they're beside them. That's super helpful. Obviously, you've got your AoE Fear as well as a Priest. All those things are great to help control those Spiteful mobs, yeah? But yeah, the Night Fae, Fae Guardians, the Benevolent Fairy, reducing the cooldown of Void form is super important. Why is it so important? Well, what happens when you go into Void form? When you go into Void form, right, number one, you're extending your dots with Void Bolt, so you don't have to spend time reapplying your dots. It gives you 2 charges of Mind Blast. I think you can see the synergy there. More charges of Mind Blast. Oh, hey, we're upping our Mind Blast damage. That seems pretty good. And then, of course, you're just generating way more insanity. In other words, every time you are in Void form, a lot more of your time is spent actually with uptime of Devouring Plague and being able to spam cast more Mind Blasts. So, with Talbadar Stratagem, it's a very, very big increase in your damage. To the point where, I don't know, it's probably not mandatory, but certainly it is the best option, for sure. There's no question. Shadowflame Prism is a little different because it comes off of your Mindbender cooldown or your Shadow Fiend, but obviously you're talented into Mindbender with that legendary. It's just a flat 1 minute cooldown. Nothing about that changes. It syncs up with Power Infusion. It's gonna work just fine. It's still better with Night Fae, I think, slightly. In fact, I think Night Fae makes it arguably even stronger than Talbadar's in single target, depending on your stats, depending on the fight. It's certainly an option, right? It's certainly an option. One thing, actually, one of the questions that came up quite a lot in my last video is people were asking, when would you use Searing Nightmare versus Misery? You know, what's your sort of idea of these different builds? And very much for me as a Shadow Priest, I already sort of touched on this idea already in this video, in fact. The build that I like running does depend actually quite a bit on the classes and the players that I'm playing with. So for example, like my favorite, obviously probably everyone's favorite spec to run with is probably a Fire Mage, because they just have crazy AoE burst damage on a super short cooldown. Marksmanship Hunter is pretty good as well for that sort of thing, though obviously they have been nerfed in 9.0.5. But I quite like playing with those sorts of classes. Classes that will excel in AoE, and then I actually quite like building into these Misery type talent builds where, yeah, you're not gonna do the consistent or burst AoE, like high target AoE damage that a Searing Nightmare build could do, But what you are bringing with a build like this is much stronger damage on 1 to 2 to 3 targets. On smaller groups of targets, this is where you're really carrying things. You've got short cooldowns. You're very good at blowing up. You're going to do great damage to prideful mobs. You'll do good damage to bosses, all that good stuff. That is personally what I like doing. So for me, if I can ever get away with not playing Searing Nightmare, that's actually the way I prefer to go. That's the way I like to go, because I'm kind of going, okay, you know, oftentimes the other specs in the dungeons are specced into that big, bursty AoE. Let them do that. I don't need to do that. It's super chill. It's super fine. It doesn't bother me. I'll prioritize the single target damage. I'll try to get my cooldowns to cover stuff that the other cooldowns aren't going to cover. That's sort of my theory on it. So that's what I like to do. That's part of why I like this build so much. It does it pretty much does exactly that. In fact, you know, you could very easily again, we got Soul Shape to escape this. Absolutely love Soul Shape. So much more usable than the Venthyr teleport, like actually in combat. Because it's just, you start moving instantly, whereas the Venthyr thing doesn't move you till it finishes casting, so you can be caught on the the last tick or two of the cast or whatever. But yeah, it's just something, that's just the way I sort of like to approach Shadow Priest, right? If I wanted to be an absolute AoE blasting class, I'd play a different, I would have been playing a different spec. That's sort of my approach. So I like to build into the strength of the spec and fulfilling that role within the party, because the party needs a variety, often needs, doesn't always, but you know, it's nice to have a variety of damage to cover those different types. And certainly, I mean, we'll pay attention now through these few pulls. You know, you're not going to be too bad in terms of some AoE. Now, on some dungeons, I would still always run Searing Nightmare. Let's say, like, Halls of Atonement would be one example where I'm nearly always going to run. I'm nearly always running Searing Nightmare, because you do large pulls there. And, for example, the second boss, Echelon, I think I was trying to cast... I cast a damage spell by accident when I meant to cast Psychic Scream there. That was pretty bad. Got smacked. Didn't die, though, because it's only a 15. But, yeah, like the second boss, yeah, Echelon in Halls of Atonement, he summons in a bunch of ads. It's literally part of the boss fight, so, you know, being a single target spec there isn't really helping with the boss. It's making the boss harder. So that's sort of part of my theory there. Or obviously, if you need to nuke down the big room before the final boss with all those ghosts that he's sucking life out of, yeah, Searing Nightmare. So that's one example where you kind of go, okay, for the dungeon, it makes a lot more sense to build like that. So you do have to be a bit varied. You do have to have some variety, which is nice. It's good. It could put some people off the class or the spec, but for me, it is something that I actually enjoy. This pull right here, for example, with Misery, you can see we actually did pretty badly. We're not doing 0 damage, but I mean, we're below the tank there on that particular pull. You know, lots and lots of AoE. It's just not something we're going to be good at with this spec. You know, Searing Nightmare could be blasting reasonably well, but then again, those mobs can jump all over the place and you lose a lot of damage. Same sort of thing with this pull. This is quite a big pack. I think we're going to go, obviously, into Void Eruption here. I should mention this again. I mentioned it a lot in the last video, but one of the massive advantages of playing Night Fae Shadow Priest is that, well, your Void form, like I said, it's often a 1 minute, 10-second cooldown. That's extremely short. And it is 90 to 95% of the time, I would say, it's a bad decision to hold your cooldowns, right? It's a bad decision to hold your cooldowns. You're going to be better off actually using them and letting them do damage, right? Making the most out of it is going to be important. So again, you can see here in this large AoE, yes, we pop Void form, but these mobs, even though it is fortified, the mobs do die pretty fast, so we're going to fall behind on some of that damage, right? It's just the way it's going to be. The mobs, these are weak mobs. There's lots of them. By the time we dot everything up, we're not just going to have that much time to actually put Devouring Plague on a target and then start spamming Mind Blast into it. It's just not as practical. They're just a bit too squishy. A much better sort of pull for us is a pull where there's like... In fact, I think there's a pull coming... did we already do it? I can't remember. I wasn't paying attention. I think we did already do it. You know the pull where there's like the captain of the guard and then the 3 little guardsmen. You know, there's the big priority target, the big captain, and then his 3 little guys that aren't as important. That sort of damage. That's a great ring of peace, by the way. Like, we could just run here. You know, we're going to stay and kill them. Just, especially seeing as people were dying to them earlier. But yeah, in that sort of circumstance, by the way, you just run down and start fighting the Portal Guardian. That ring of peace basically handled those things. We kind of lost, whatever, 5, 10, probably 10 seconds at least trying to do that, which is kind of bad. I can't remember what I was saying. I was saying something. Oh, I was talking about our damage profiles. Yeah, okay, cool. This is another great example right here. This Portal Guardian, you can see how much damage that does with Grievous as well this week. Very spooky, fortified Grievous. It's not pleasant at all. This is a weak aura I have as well to replace the dungeon timer. It just makes the percentage bar, right? The percent currently 62.36%. It makes that bar glow when you're about to summon a Spiteful by killing the pack that you're currently on. That's a great idea. I know one of my friends, he has a weak aura that says it. It actually does a /say in game, saying like, oh, Spiteful coming in 5, Spiteful in whatever. You know, he makes it very clear for when that's coming. You know, that extra info, because it is something, let's be honest, it's something that you do lose track of during the dungeons oftentimes, you know? You'll notice most of them, but it's the spiteful mobs, the prideful mobs, sorry, that catch you by surprise that do the most harm. So that's definitely something to watch out for. This prideful, I don't know about, I think this, the route through the dungeon is obviously a tough thing. This particular prideful is not super helpful, right, because this pack is quite easy. So you kind of don't take this buff all that far into some tough mobs. By the way, pro tip here, I'm sure you guys already know about this, but spiteful mobs here in this section of Theater of Pain, you do have to kill because they put you in combat and you can't use the portal. So I think some mistakes I've seen before is people like take the portal or try to take the portal. Meanwhile, the spiteful mob is chasing down their friends. This mob pack is terrifying. There's so much damage that happens here. There's stuff that sort of needs to be dispelled. The Soulstorm ad does tons of damage. So we're going into our CDs to try to blast. Obviously, you can see some of the issue being, you know, it's only a 15, so this is an issue that you'll run into in your keys. One of the issues is that, you know, by the time we've ramped up, the mobs are almost dead. You know, with the damage that we can do, the mobs are almost dead. So it can be tough to get the full value out of all of your abilities. Like, okay, we just ran out of Void Form right there, just as the mobs are dying, so I guess we did get full value that time, but it's pretty close to not. I guess, in fact, we had 2 people die, which is probably why they died. If those people hadn't died, because they are, in fact, they are the other 2 DPS, if they hadn't died, we probably would have killed that mob pack with Void Form still on. So that is one thing to watch out for sure. That does make this a bit tougher. It's just one of the things you have to be aware of, where Shadow Priest does actually scale a bit kind of nicely into those higher keys. It does bring that advantage, yeah, for sure. This pack here also a little nasty. The double tornado guys, well, it's not hard. It's a very easy pack, but it's just a pack where a silly mistake can cost you your life. So I got hit by one of these in the last run. I can't remember because this was a day or so ago I recorded this. I can't remember if I got hit this time. It all sort of blurs together. I have been spamming Theater of Pain. I'm so sick of Theater of Pain, guys. But if you don't know, Soul Letting Ruby, the trinket that drops from here, gives you a big old chunk of crit, is the best trinket for Shadow Priest now, especially with this build. So I really, really want to get my hands on that trinket, but it's just kind of hard. There we go. We're going to Psychic Horror this guy, so he's not going to chase us down. Spiteful mobs lose health over time. We're able to fear him there at the end as well. So yeah, as a Shadow Priest, like I said, loads of tools to counter that Spiteful. But yeah, have you been hunting for the Soul Letting Ruby? I haven't quite run 10 Theater of Pains, but I think I'm up to something like 8 over the last couple of weeks. I know for some of you you're going like, that's not much at all. I did that all in one day. So yeah, I need to get the finger out, but yeah, you get sick of running the same dungeon over and over and over, just praying to RNG. At least I had friends join for some of them. That wasn't so bad because, you know, they have the potential to trade. But yeah, I probably should have dispelled that, huh? Probably should have dispelled that. Get caught in the fear, and then one of those casts goes through and chunks us. Very spooky. This mob pack is quite nasty. It's extra nasty with this curse that you get on that keeps dropping pools. Obviously those fear pools, we got hit by one. It's a hassle. Good imprisoned by the Demon Hunter to control that mob. Very nice. stop it casting its thing. That is one downside of Shadow Priest, actually, is that your interrupt, your kick, is on a very long cooldown. A very long cooldown. So that is something bad. I should have actually dropped a Mass Dispel here. I'm looking at that. You can see that we have a debuff on me and on the healer. He dispel, not the healer, on the shaman. The soul corruption. You can see it right there. He did dispel it, but he was falling behind on the dispels. That was something that I could have actually assisted with on the priest, right? That's a piece of utility that we have that I'm absolutely not making the most of. So note that for yourself on those mobs. Soul corruption. Look to Mass Dispel that. I think the previous mob pack did it as well. The one with the second Soulstorm guy. So look to help out your healer, because yeah, they will struggle, quite possibly. Especially on a fortified week. They're going to have a tough time. They're going to have a very tough time. I know I certainly feel bad as a priest healer where you can't dispel the curse. You just have to sit there and cry and hope that you're running with the fire mage that I've talked about before. Hope you've got a fire mage who can dispel those curses for you, because of course they can. Or you, the healer, cannot. Feels bad, man, right? Feels bad. I think Shaman can dispel curse. So at least he's got that going for him. There's just a lot of stuff. So this is interesting here. We obviously had to release. We do not have a battle res with this group. No battle res. And this is obviously a nasty run back. But I think they are actually, you can see they are in combat. You can see the Grievous building up in them. You can see the healer's mana bar, Paradise there. So he is low, but people are still alive. Keeping that Spiteful up. Again, it's fine. It doesn't matter how low his mana is when he ends the fight. He just needs to not run out of mana during the fight so people die. But yeah, I thought that was actually pretty slick. I was pretty impressed by that move by our Puck team here. Pretty cool. I guess like a plus 15, we're pretty decent, I guess. But that was cool, right? That was cool. Actually holding damage on a mob, a display of patience, pretty sick, right? To hold on to that mob and not proc the thing before. Here's another place where you can use Mass Dispel if needed. You can Mass Dispel these dots, which can be very helpful. Again, when your healer's falling behind in particular, can be a very helpful thing to do. I decided not to use Mass Dispel here because it does have a cooldown. And I know that, again, I already mentioned it, right? But when I pop those Fey Guardians, 20% damage reduction for me. And then I also have, Desperate Prayer if I need it or whatever. And I'm also going to be self-healing a lot through that. So here we go. We're actually going to Mass Dispel this set instead. So I think that's probably a better choice overall. Again, that's sort of a specific thing to playing with that Fey Guardian. You actually see on the damage meter that the burst that we have there, Shadow Priest with Void Form and Talbadars, is actually really good single target burst. Now it's obviously going to fall off. We'll wait for the next Void Form. But then when Void Form comes back, we might catch up again. Actually, we won't because the boss is about to die. Commit. No, we're not committing. We're going into the thing. Ooh, that's a bit scary. Be very careful. I guess the healer's running. He was confident and he ran towards the exit. But that's my biggest tip. The biggest thing I see go wrong with that particular boss is that people do not pre-plan where they're going to move to deal with Draw Soul. And in particular, that Phantasmal Parasite you get, it pulls this damage in AoE. So if you go to the same spot to deal with Draw Soul, the same pack of Grabby Hands to deal with Draw Soul as your compatriots, we actually used 3 Hellstones already, I didn't even notice. It can be very easy to kill each other. It can be very easy to kill each other with that Phantasmal Parasite. Especially, there can be some times where it will cast the Phantasmal Parasite just before it finishes, like, Draw Soul, or, like, around the time where it's casting Draw Soul. So you can get completely wrecked by that. You can both get it and just instantly blow each other up, which is, like, boss fight over. GG. Good interrupts there by everyone, keeping these controlled. Love to see it. Very nice. I think these mobs might be immune to fear. Can't remember now. But yeah, that is very much something to watch out for. Really do recommend it. Again, as a ranged DPS as Shadow Priest, you can go and stand beside those hands for the Draw Soul, so you're ready. And like your teammates then can look at you and go, oh hey, where am I going to go for Draw Soul? I've got several seconds to plan it out. And they can look over at one patch and they see this big shadowy boy with tentacles coming out of him, shooting big purple laser beams at the boss, and they go, oh, that's where the Shadow Priest is. I'll go to the other one. It's those small things, right? It's the small play that can make a bit of a difference. And then you also have, of course, it gives you the Nubkeks pass, the permission to rage really, really hard when they come and they walk and stand on top of you and try to kill you, Phantasmal Parasite. You go, how dare you? This is my spot. I've been here all along. Who are you? Who are you? So again, this sort of pull, this is going to be a relatively weak pull for us here on Shadow. I can't remember. I sort of half remember not using my spell here. I probably should have. That's a mistake there. I had my kick available and I didn't kick the discharge. Now we are going into void form, living by the living by what I preach. Right? Is that it? Whatever. Yeah. Gotta just pop void form on CD. Doesn't matter. Actually, we did great damage on that pull. Never mind. Cool. That went great. So yeah, popping void form, we did fine. There you go. We're not gonna hang on. Ah, Roger Young. Who is this? Rogtronic does Hearthstone videos on YouTube. What? Crazy. Oh my lord. Note to self: sign out of BattleNet next time to record one of these. I like doing these live and going through. I know it can be a bit rambly and so on, but I at the same time I kind of like it that it is just a live run through of the dungeon. And I'm not going to edit out like the stupid parts where like I miss kicks or I stand in bullshit or fuck up. Like I'm going to leave that in. We'll leave that in. Because I think you can learn from mistakes as well. At least I hope that you guys can learn from my mistakes. At least I'll learn from my mistakes. I can see the shit I'm doing that's wrong and go, oh, that was really stupid. Now I've just embarrassed myself in front of a load of people. I should not do that next time. So here probably, we're building up some insanity on that guy's Void Torrent. Maybe a bad idea. That is something that you can do. I think there it was probably wasted, to be fair. But something you can do. Void Torrent obviously gives so much insanity that you can sort of obviously this is the core way you play your rotation, right? Is that you pre-use Void Torrent before Void Eruption. Because although it does really good damage, it's more so to just build up a chunk of insanity to go into Void Eruption, with Devouring Plagues ready to go. So here we go. We'll dot these guys up. Go into the Void Torrent. We're actually going to proc a thing off this. We're going to pop our dudes. Going to throw out a Devouring Plague, and that's actually probably a mistake. You should really go straight into Void Form after popping Fey Guardians. I got a bit greedy there, and by getting greedy, actually do less damage overall because you lose that cooldown reduction on Void Form. The typical opening rotation for this, though, is going to be something like, just Vampiric Touch to apply your 2 dots. Do a Void Torrent, do a Devouring Plague into a Mind Blast, then summon in your Shadow Fiend, pop your Fey Guardians, pop Void Form into a Void Bolt, into reapplying Devouring Plague, and then your Void Form rotation, right? That's sort of your opener that you're going to go with. And then with whatever trinket you have, you'll pop it at different times. I do not use my trinket optimally. I have the Imperial Ordnance, and I will be honest, I've been a little bit too lazy to fully optimize it. Certainly for Mythic Plus, I do not optimize it. I have it a bit optimized for I have it sort of optimized for the raid fight we're on right now, which is Stone Legion Generals. But basically Imperial Ordnance, it puts a dot on the targets you're fighting, and then after, 15 seconds, it gives you a bunch of intellect. Kind of a pain in the ass, to be honest, because you kind of want to cast it before you go, so that you'll get the intellect proc when you're doing your big damage. It's a bit awkward, kind of a hassle. But anyway, that's life. This boss you guys had an interesting tip, which I don't think I test here in this one. You had an interesting tip, which is that if you target yourself right before, you can see the timer right there, Tenderizing Smash, which is where the boss pulls you to him, that he actually won't do his hooks and pull you to him. So you can actually stand at range and be totally fine, which is quite interesting. Now, obviously, the downside of standing at range is that these oozing leftovers will jump away from all that melee cleave and just the natural cleave that comes from being closer to the kill target. I actually tried it right there. I didn't target the boss, but I didn't target myself. That was the mistake. That's the mistake right there. You have to target, I believe, yourself or a friendly target, maybe, and it will hook you to whatever you're targeting. Something like that. I don't know. But, yeah, apparently that's a way to cheese it. That seems to me like the sort of thing that... I don't know. I guess if you're like super min-maxy, that you can certainly do it. Oh, I stole my hook. How dare you? You can certainly do it. It's definitely, I don't know. That's sort of straddles the line of clever use of game mechanics versus, that's something that's very clearly broken and will probably be fixed at some point. Although, actually, you know what? I take it back. That seems to me like the sort of bug that is probably kind of difficult to fix, and they probably won't ever bother fixing. That seems like the sort of bug that could easily last through the whole expansion, and it's just really stupid, and it's the sort of thing that just annoys a new player. When you hear about it, you're like, wait, what? You can just target yourself and the gore chop thing won't cast most of the time. It's like, that's really stupid. Okay. All right, you can see I was thinking. I was like, oh, I probably should have eaten food. But, I mean, we've got 7 minutes on the timer. I think we're okay. We're not going to 2+2 it or anything. There should be a relatively easy +1, but is it? Let's find out. So we're going into our opener here. Mind Blast, Fey Guardians into the Void Eruption. And we will pop Power Infusion as well. I think it's fine. Again, the more important thing is to burst the boss when she gets below 50% health. That's when she goes into phase 2. In fact, you can see Plater, again, great add-on. You can see super clear on her health bar there. Makes it very obvious when she is going into that phase 2. Phase 2 is nastier. That's where you got the dudes charging around. It's kind of horrible. Again, much like I said last time we did this dungeon, what I like to do on the Shadow Priest here is I can even drop my guy relatively far away, but then I'll kick him with a silence. It's a really long silence, and that will make the mob it will stop the mob casting and make them walk into melee, which I think is kind of helpful. But as you can see, we're coming up to that halfway point on the boss. It's only fortified, so I was a little bit sketchy on whether this was the right choice. So you can see that void form is still like 20 seconds off, but we will get a void form here in the second half as well. I think overall it's definitely, no question, worth doing. But compared to Tyrannical, where you pretty much will get it back, probably more so around the 50% mark, here we're going to be a little bit late. But yeah, like I think this part is quite hard. This is a really nasty overlap where you've got the charge into the Dark Devastation. That's really nasty. Definitely saving Dispersion for that. Or again, this is another fairly nasty overlap. The drop the Soaky dudes while you're being sucked in. Pretty horrible. Again, we're doing the same thing. We're kicking the dudes, help them group up under the boss. We actually have 2 people dead. The 2 DPS. Oh, Lord. This is something where we're really going to struggle here as well as Shadow Priest. Oh, Lord. There's Dispersion. We're just going to walk through the laser beam. Ain't scared of you. But yeah, with that level of movement, it becomes very difficult with this build to do good DPS to those. That would be something if we were with the Shadowflame Prism, we might have been able to do a bit better, right? If Mindbender, but I guess that's the thing, if Mindbender is up. But if Mindbender was up, we could have hit them with like a Mind Blast or Shadow or Death, and the Mindbender Shadowflame Prism would have chunked them. It would have been maybe okay. But yeah, with high movement, it's like you have to put your dots on, and then Devouring Plague and Mind Blast. You're very slow to get damage out in AoE. So you can see for the most part, I was trying to not even bother doing that there. No Ruby Pepe hands. Oh, man. Oh, man. And that was a few days ago. It feels even worse. So here's the damage breakdown. In fact, let me pause it right there so we can see. Oh, I missed the pause. Well, rip. No Ruby Pepe hands, round 2. If you are Shadow Priest, get used to seeing this, guys. Getting that Ruby, upgrading it with Valor. It hasn't dropped from the Great Vault either, obviously, in case you're wondering. But you can see here, so I guess, like, whatever. This damage to Spiteful Shade, that's completely unnecessary. But in terms of our damage breakdown, you could go and you could compare that, if you like, to the Shadowflame Prism one. See the overall damage. Overall damage in the dungeon, actually, from us was really solid. It did really well. And this is with Fortified. I think on a Tyrannical... Oh, you know what? I actually don't know. Because I feel like on the mob packs for Tyrannical... You might struggle a bit more compared to Shadowflame, and Shadowflame Prism still does do good boss damage. I honestly feel like these 2 builds are so close together from what I've seen. I don't think there's a massive difference between the 2. I personally actually kind of prefer this one. I prefer Talbadar's. It's a more straightforward playstyle, and I kind of like that. Kind of the Mindbender thing is kind of fun, but it's a bit gimmicky. I don't know, though. What do you think? Which one do you prefer? Which one do you have more damage success with? You can obviously see in the damage breakdown here, though, that Mind Blast is doing lots of damage. Our Voidling is tiny damage. It does barely anything compared to the Mindbender with the other build. But we do, of course, have... we've got Void Torrent instead, right? Void Torrent instead. Psychic Link. Again, you can see the breakdown here. Psychic Link, it's a nice bit of damage. It synergizes well with Talbadar's, but it's only overall 5.7% of our damage. It's not absolutely insane. You could probably run Shadow Crash and get away with it. It wouldn't do that much less. It would still be pretty good. Psychic Link's not that strong. It's actually pretty weak talent, but it does synergize well with Talbadar's. But there you are. That's the run. Again, that Devouring Plague damage, again, worth noting, and that Mind Blast damage, also worth noting. the big strength of this, although we did good overall damage here, I think, that's not always, in fact, I would not expect that often to be the case. I probably just simply outgear these guys is probably what it is, right? But as you can see from the damage breakdown, Devouring Plague, Mind Blast, those are single target damage abilities. That is really good priority damage. That is what you bring as the Shadow Priest, on top of, Mass Dispels, the Stun, the Fear, Power Infusing yourself for single target priority damage, Power Infuse your Fire Mage so he can Flame Strike everything, and do disgusting, probably like, if there was a Fire Mage in this dungeon and we Power Infused him, he'd probably be doing like 7k damage overall. It'd be insane, So yeah, there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you did, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.